what is standard deviation? What is that?
Okay, well, standard deviation is a measure of volatility above or below the mean. And it's based on the normal bell curve. And let me share the screen to explain this. So this is the normal bell curve. So this curve will pretty much cover 100% of the data that's out here. The mean is obviously, the halfway point between all this data. And the standard deviation is basically 3 intervals of volatility here. Measures above the mean or 3 measures below the mean.
Let me interrupt you real quick. So some people may not know this word mean. What does it mean?
Mean is just an average of data over a period of time.
And so the mean would be the average price the stock would typically like to trade.
Yes.
Let's say some other numbers. Let's say temperature, weather, right?
Yes.
What's the average temperature in the spring? The temperature typically is daily during the springtime. That would be the mean, that average point where that data set would typically be. Is that a good characterization?
That's a very good picture definition.
So in looking at this curve, we have the mean in the middle of the bell curve.
Right.
And so let's go standard deviations from working in the middle, working out. And right now it's still confusing, I'm sure, to some, but we're going to make a point here, so stay with us. So one standard deviation is 68%. We know generally, statistically, data would stay in this range if a data set is at that endpoint. So the key is at that endpoint. So if it's at the -1 SD or the +1 SD, then we know that there is a 68% chance that it's going to be within that range. But there's also about 30% chance it's going to be outside of that range. But the further the data set gets away from its mean, the more we could predict where it's going to be, because it's getting further and further away from where it trades or likes to be on average. So let's look at this second data set.
Okay, so now we're looking at the second standard deviation. So now this is roughly 95% of the data within a data set will trade within this area underneath the normal bell curve.
So you're making a big loop there, Patrick. So so that -2 SD and the +2 SD got a 95% chance. If a data set reaches those extremities at the -2 SD or the +2 SD, based on the way that data behaves on an average manner, it should fall in between. So if it's way on one extreme, there's a 95% chance that it's going to go back towards the average or the other extreme, but it should trade within that data set. It's really too far from its average. Yeah. And we should use the plus as high and we should use the minus as low, Patrick, and we can flip the curve to the left. So,
we can do that.
So
then let's just say that the stock price is trading above the second standard deviation. That means it should fall. It has a greater than 95% chance of falling back to the mean. So then that would be considered overbought. you know, standard deviation, if it's above the second standard deviation. If it's below the second standard deviation on the low side, then that would present a great buying opportunity if you have like one of your favorite stocks.
Let's go 3 standard deviations, Patrick. That's even crazier.
Okay. Well, that's very extreme. I mean, stocks rarely trade 3 standard deviations from the mean. So 3 standard deviations means that 99.7%, so basically 100% of the time, or near, you know, the data set would be within 3 standard deviations.
Yeah, so 99.7. There still is a 0.3, Patrick. There's a 0.3 for a reason. That means something still could happen.
Yes.
0.3% of the time. And it does happen.
Yes.
Right?
So you're talking about like an extreme black swan event.
Right. So the key is understanding the probabilities of knowing how far you're away from the average price of a data set. And in knowing that, we can use puts and calls, or we could purchase or sell stocks at particular prices based on knowing these statistical analytical data points. So let's focus in on the second deviation, because that is what we talk about a lot on the show, and that's what we're going to go into further in the show. So
yes.
Why would that be important, Patrick? Why would it be important, and why do we use the second deviation in stock pickings, statistical analysis with trading stocks? I would say the reason why we do not use 3 is it rarely happens.
Yes.
Why we do not use 1, it happens too often.
Right.
So 2 is that sweet spot where when your stock prices or your data set gets to either 2 to the minus, which is second deviation low, or 2 to the plus, second deviation high, we have a statistical advantage knowing that on placing trades or getting into a particular stock that we like, or getting out of a particular stock that we like. We also have another advantage of, if we want to do just a trade, selling puts or selling calls, or buying puts or buying calls. Now, what if we, Patrick, took this standard deviation curve with the mean in the middle being the 200-day moving average if we're using stocks? What if we took that and reverted over and turned it like the point on the top, tilted towards the left, and flipped it over? We'll basically have a Bollinger Band, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would.
So if we had the cone on the top and we flipped it over towards the left, and we had this thing sticking up, we would have the second deviation high. Up above the plus 2SD, we would have the minus 2SD on the bottom. And that would be our Bollinger Band. Then you would see that if we were selling puts, the strategy would be to sell below the second deviation low. And statistically, we know that 95% chance is going to be between the minus SD, 2SD, and the plus. So we only have like a 5% chance that the stock price or the data set is going to fall below, and that's what we want, because we sell premium and collect premium, and then there's an expiration date, and if the contract expires worthless, we get to keep the money we collected and have no obligation to do anything, because when you sell puts, you have the obligation to buy if it falls below your strike price. So you sell at a strike price below the minus 2SD, and when you collect the premium and you collect $1,000, and a week later, if the stock is not below that strike price, below the minus 2SD that you sold, you get to keep the premium with no obligation to buy the stock. You just made $1,000. Did that make sense, Patrick?
Yes.
And so that's what we do with selling puts. on the plus side, can you point to the 2 plus side right there? When the stock price is way above its mean and trading at the plus 2SD, well, we sell a call above the 2SD, between the 2SD and the 3SD, and we would sell that call maybe a week out, a month out, or whatever. And the strategy is same as the put. We sell the call, and what we want to happen is the contract expires worthless. We get to keep the premium, and we walk away with contracts that expire worthless. So it's a worthless contract expiration game. Now, there's other things you can do with this type of probability trading as well. That is, what if you don't want to be a trader? What if you just want to be a person who long-term invests? Then you can also use this probability trading and thinking as well. But go ahead, Patrick. Sounds like you want to jump in.
Yeah, so let's just say that you're not interested in buying and selling options. That might be a little bit higher than than your risk tolerance. And what you could do is you could look at this. You could look at the Bollinger Band, which is essentially a graphical representation of the normal bell curve. And then once the stock trades below its second deviation, that would tend to indicate a great buying opportunity.
So rather than trying to figure this minus 2SD plus 2SD out, the Bollinger Band does it for you. The top line of the Bollinger Band shows you the plus deviation high. The middle shows you the mean, and the bottom shows you the minus 2SD. You are looking at a standard deviation curve graphically plotted on the chart. And it's even shaded for you to say, this is where the stock should trade 95% of the time. Where would you like to buy? Would you like to buy high or buy low? Would you like to buy anything high or low?
Yeah, you don't want to buy high. You want to buy low.
You absolutely want to buy low. You sell high, but you buy low, right? So let's say, for instance, I wanted to be an investor in Eli Lilly. And I'm saying, okay, I looked at Eli Lilly. It's a great company. It consistently stays above the exponential 200-day moving average. It has a pipeline of all of these new drugs coming out. That's why you like it, Patrick. We talked about this stuff off camera. Yes. Now, I just want to buy the stock. I don't want to do all this option selling. I don't understand it. All of this. I just want to buy the stock long term. Well, in looking at this, you would say, hey, Eli Lilly right now is trading at the second deviation low of the curve. So this is a great time to buy it because it's the exponential 200-day moving average is telling you long term is this stock price is trending up in terms of data set. And I want to buy it at a point where it's on the low portion of its volatility.
Exactly.
Because that's what all of that squiggly line is as far as stock prices. Stocks prices do not just go straight up. They go up with volatility, up and down, up and down, up and down. And unless you have some sort of metrics of these types, it's hard to see, on a short period, a daily or weekly basis, if all of that volatility is actually going up over time. But with these kind of tools, you can see right at a daily period that this stuff is going up over time. So I can look at the second deviation low, Patrick. I can say, oh, this is a great opportunity getting Eli Lilly. It's on the minus 2SD. I'm going to purchase me 50 shares here. So before I purchase any stock, I make sure it is at least in the middle of the Bollinger Band, at least in the middle on the 20-day moving average.
Yeah, you don't want to buy up here. You don't want to buy up
You
here.
definitely don't want to buy at the plus 2 SD. That is the point. So, I that's a mouthful. I hope that stuff makes sense to our audience. I really do. So, I hope so. Did that make sense, Patrick?
That made total sense.
Okay. And I have a question in the chat. And the question is, why exponential 200 day instead of the regular 200 day, Patrick?
Well, you want to do the 200 day, the exponential moving day, because